News of the day items for today, and it's not happy news for the most part, but we'll get through it as we always do. It's a hockey community, and all dry humor aside, the hockey community is going through some stuff right now, isn't it? So we'll start things off with the fact that they've come out now today and said Dahlin's out indefinitely with a concussion. So the hope that it might be a short-term concussion, kind of out the window. And this is where when people say, I think a guy should get suspended for the length of the injury. No. The problem with that is simple. You might throw an elbow and you might cause an indefinite concussion. You might throw the exact same elbow and the guy jumps right back up. So if you're going to say that a suspension should be the length of an injury, well, if the guy doesn't get hurt and doesn't leave the game, then there's no chance the guy gets suspended. So that's where the problem comes in. And there are plenty of instances where something will happen in game. It's accidental. A guy will get injured. The season's over. It's a whole issue that the NHL doesn't want to get into. So while I can understand the sentiment behind it, and for Sabres fans, I get it, it's a whole thing that the NHL can't get themselves into. Vladimir Soboka's had injury on his right knee. He's out indefinitely. So for the Sabres, who had extra defensemen, and there was some belief that, hey, maybe they'll move one. Well, the fact they've had Montour playing forward because they haven't had enough guys lately, I would think that any idea of trading for depth, it's a challenge right now if you're Buffalo. And for Jason Botterill, good luck with that because there's a lot of injuries that have been happening for them lately. And yeah, with Dahlin out, that's a huge hole on that blue line at a time when the team really can't afford to lose a guy who plays that many minutes and plays such an important role on the team. Rod Brind'Amour, the reason I'm wearing Carolina today and the reason I went with the original Carolina Hurricanes jersey, I love the way Rod Brind'Amour talks to the press. I love that he came out. He probably saw 10 times more reporters than he would normally see for a Carolina Hurricanes coach. He's like, all right, I know why you guys are all here. The incident in question did take place. That was the Mikal Jordan claim that Bill Peters kicked him in the back. This came out yesterday while we were all debating the LU allegation. And Brind'Amour said it happened. Bill Peters kicked the player in the back, but that the staff immediately took it to management and management dealt with it immediately and he never saw anything like that again. So this is where we're having an important conversation and we will come back to that. But Brind'Amour came out and said, it happened. All right, let's just shut up about it. It's out of the way. And he didn't even have to be asked. I love the way Brind'Amour comports himself. I love the way he handles things as a coach. Heart's on his sleeve at all times. I think it's fantastic. And this is why the players love playing for him. Bruce Boudreau got an apology last night at the start of the second period. This is where it gets dangerous. So last year during the playoffs, I remember people saying, replay for everything. Get the call right. Replay for everything, get the call right. And I said, it's still human beings making up your mind. How are you guys going to feel when the replay shows you one thing and the NHL says something else? That's what happened last night. Bruce Boudreau challenges a goal by the New Jersey Devils because Wayne Simmons played it with a high stick. And the Minnesota Fox guys, they saw it right away and they go, yeah, that's a high stick. The whistle should have blown. That play should have been dead. That shouldn't be a goal. And they went, no, it's a good goal. Play the call on the ice stands. There you go. Oh, and Minnesota's penalized too. Second period, he gets an apology. They emailed the team an apology too. Sorry about that. Whoops. Our bad. That shouldn't have been a goal. Whoops. Maybe they saw the Fox Sports feed, and they went, oh, look at this. Look at the feed these guys have. These guys have a really good camera angle. Whoops, we got that wrong. Now, as I put on the board, imagine that in a playoff game. Just imagine in a playoff game where they view the replay and they give you the wrong answer. And you have a penalty against you. So now you've allowed a goal and you're penalized. And it shouldn't have been a goal. Or imagine they take a goal off the board they shouldn't have taken off the board, and then you get an apology to start the next period. Sorry about that. We got that wrong. Whoops. Yeah. We will never get a situation where everything's 100% correct, but that makes it worse. It makes it worse. So we'll see if we have any kind of change in how this stuff is done. But yeah, that was an interesting call because yeah, clearly he played it with a high stick. Even the announcer said, Simmons uses white tape, so you can see that the puck is clearly played with a high stick. If it was black tape, you could go, I don't know, maybe the puck hits there, but you can clearly see he played it with a high stick, and that play should have been blown dead. All right, Valentin Zikov is on waivers for the Vegas Golden Knights. His 20-game suspension ends Friday. My guess is he clears waivers and ends up in the American League. Zikov was an odd pickup for me for Vegas anyways last year. I don't see a great, tremendous upside with him. He's young. The skill level's there. I think he's a guy who's what I would call a tweener, which is just in between AHL and NHL. And sort of the same as like Goldobin in Vancouver. Goldobin's been called up, but he's a guy who, if they have to waive him again, he'll clear waivers. But Zikov's on waivers for Vegas, so he's going to go down rather than playing. I understand it. Their lineup's pretty much set, and their forward group's pretty much set. Peary cleared waivers not that long ago, so yeah, Vegas, I don't think they'll have any problems getting Zikov through waivers. UC Saros is starting his third straight tonight. That's noteworthy because Pekka Rinne's healthy. He's fine. He's just not playing very well. And so Peter Laviolette's making the right call. This is the tough call. Really, really tough call to basically tell your veteran goaltender who's won 800 games for you, however many it is that Rinne's won, you have to go to him and say, we're going with the other guy. He's just playing better right now. And Rinne is a good enough team guy that he'll accept that. I don't think you'll ever hear a complaint from Rinne or any talk about him being upset because he's not playing every game. Rinne, to me, seems like one of the ultimate team guys. So Saros will get that third straight start, and he's earned it. Earned it on the New York Islanders. Eberle has been in a slump. He hasn't earned that spot on the top line. He's been bumped out. He was skating with Komarov and Del Cole today at practice, and Barry Trotz has been talking to him about this slump and trying to play his way through it. And it's one of those things that happens. Now, Eberle's offensive numbers last year weren't fantastic either, and I've mentioned that. Eberle is not the offensive player that he was early in his career. And so his numbers definitely down, especially in contrast to how much money the guy makes. And we'll see what the Islanders do and when Eberle breaks out of this. I assume he gets out of that slump, but for an Islanders team that scores by committee, it's not a huge problem. It's one of those things that it does, though, affect how much ice time you want to give a guy if he's not able to get that puck in the net, regardless of what the reason is. Speaking of not putting the puck in the net, I guess that's a segue into Joe Pavelski not having a point in 6 games. He had 7 points in the 5. I think he had 7 points in the 5 games before that. Pavelski's been very hot and cold for Dallas. The good news is he had a lot of shots last night. He's getting the opportunities. He's getting the looks. They're just not going in the net right now. Whereas early in the season, he wasn't even getting that. So overall, his numbers at the end of the year are going to look pretty poor. And what Dallas does from there should be interesting. But he is still, like I said, getting the chances. I think he pulls his way through it. But any hopes that anybody had that Pavelski was going to get 30 goals this year, even in my case, I figured he'd get 60 points. I didn't think 30 goals would happen, but I don't know that 60 points happens either. So for Pavelski, it's been a bit of a rough patch, and the Stars' offense is starting to trouble me again as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is, Bill Peters will not be behind the bench for Buffalo or for Calgary against Buffalo tonight. And there's some belief and there's a lot of speculation about what's going on behind the scenes and not if but when Calgary's going to announce that he's gone. I will say this. I do think there's a lot of things coming out. I don't understand this. I think what we're seeing is a change in hockey culture. This is not a case of players crying and whining. What people could do in days gone by are no longer what people could do now. To me, it reminds me of, parents talking to me when I was a kid about, hey, at least you don't get the belt like I did. At least you don't get whipped like I did regularly. And they would tell me these horrible stories. And, it feels kind of like that when I see some of the things getting said. I think that for a coach, no, you don't get to kick a player. You don't get to punch a player. You don't get to um, physically harm or intimidate a player, no matter what's going on. That's not okay. And I don't think that it's a horrible thing that players are coming out and saying this happened. And I think that there's a big change coming. Bob McKenzie said last night he thinks that there's a lot of teams looking over their coaching staffs, talking to players, and the one thing is, and they talked to Spezza. Spezza's concern is that this is stuff that's normally dealt with behind closed doors. This is normally stuff handled in house, and he wasn't putting anybody down for saying anything, but he was saying basically we deal with this stuff in house. It stays in the locker room. We are in an era now where that may change. And whether that's for the good or for the bad, once it changes, it's kind of hard to change it back. I don't think. I don't feel like this is, and I know it gets compared to Me Too. I don't feel like it's a Me Too thing. It feels completely different. This is just a case where coaches have been allowed to do some things, say some things, and we're realizing now that's not how you coach. I know I was thinking of different coaches yesterday, and I looked it up, and yeah, Bobby Knight was the one I was thinking of. That, man, there were things that he said and did that you can't do now. There's a lot of them. So I think there are a lot of coaches right now who have changed the way that they coach. I give props to John Tortorella. John Tortorella has, over the last decade and a half, really changed his coaching style for the players. It's not the same game. The players aren't the same. The players are a lot younger. The game is not the same. The game's a lot faster. It's not as physical. There's not as much fighting. And it's a different game. And I think part and parcel now we're seeing a change to the entire hockey culture. I know there's been complaints from parents and when you're dealing with little kids about just how serious everything is in the world of hockey, and now hockey isn't a lot of fun, or organized hockey at the very least is not a lot of fun. Even at little kid levels, you already have coaches that are way too competitive, parents that are already way too competitive, parents that think that their kid's the next Sidney Crosby, and they're not going to listen when you don't have them on the first power play, and you don't have them on the first line, and you have parents fighting with parents and coaches fighting with parents, and it's ridiculous. And I think there is a part of the hockey world that's saying, you know what, this is kind of enough. And you can't say whatever you feel like. And here, the whole thing is this: you can say whatever you want, but there's consequences for the things you say. There are consequences for things you say, whether people like that or they don't. There are always consequences for things that you say. That's always been the case. It's just now what words have consequences, what situations have consequences have changed. And so this Bill Peters thing that stemmed from what was going on with Mike Babcock, it now means that things have really, really changed. And I think we're going to end up seeing other situations with other coaches. We'll probably hear things about strength and conditioning coaches. We'll probably hear things about trainers and assistant coaches, potentially special teams, you name it. You look at what happened with Ottawa last year, the whole Uber thing, right? And what the players were saying about their special teams and their special teams coach. That wasn't supposed to be seen by the public, and yet there it was for the public to see. And I think we're starting to see players' honesty. And what that kind of comes back to as well, we talked forever about how players are kind of robots and they don't really tell us what they really think. Now they're telling us what they really think, and our answer is, well, just shut up and go play the game. We don't want to know any of that. So it's a challenging time, and for the Flames, they're going to have a challenge navigating this. I could tell yesterday with Brad Treliving, this whole thing is just really, really aggravating him and wearing him out. This is not what you want to be talking about while your team is struggling. This is not what you want to be talking about while you're trying to figure out a way to fix things on the ice. That now these kinds of incidents are coming up. And we'll see what else happens from this. It does not feel like this is the end of it. So we'll see. We'll see. This is a change in how things are done. We've seen it in other sports. Now it's hitting hockey as well. we've seen in other sports where certain things are no longer acceptable, and we're seeing this with the world of hockey. And I will say this: it is important that hockey is perceived as being an open and welcoming sport. It's already a very expensive sport to play. It is a very expensive sport to get into, and it is already perceived as being generally it's a white sport, it's a rich sport, and it does not help that picture with some of this stuff coming out. So there is a public perception issue. It's there, whether we want to say it is or it's not. And I think anybody trying to make these decisions is really, really difficult. It really is. And I've heard a lot of former players coming out. Yesterday, Anson Carter said he had the N-word thrown at him once in college. Now, the thing was, he mentioned that this player was a draft pick of the Islanders and never made the NHL. And I was going, okay. And I was going through the draft list for the Islanders trying to figure out who he's talking about. I couldn't find who he was talking about. But he said, I kind of took a number and thought, all right, if I see him in the NHL, it's on. But, it was kind of like, really? And he said, I made it clear I wouldn't put up with that. And I thought it was a great interview. I thought it was a fantastic interview. And, it was important for him to get out there. And the one thing he had to say about LU was that Akeem LU came to him, he said a couple years ago, and I'm paraphrasing from Anson, but he said he came to him a couple years ago with, I want to get back into the NHL, and kind of threw out that vibe of help a brother out kind of thing. And he was kind of like, no, I'll help people regardless, but, you can't play the race card here. That's not going to work. So he did kind of, and that's what's important here is to try to have that even-handed sort of seeing both sides of it. And that's what I try to do when I talk about these things, is I try to understand where both sides would be coming from. And that's why I'm going to end up getting comments from both sides that are horrible. But that's the way this works. I thought Anson Carter, though, was very professional in that interview, and it was fantastic. It was on Sportsnet, so I'm sure it's on their page. I would track that down. If you're curious, go ahead and track that down. Like I said, it's on there. I'm pretty sure it's on the Sportsnet page or through their YouTube channel. But it is that time where we're talking about this, and it's something that I would be fascinated to talk to players. Robin Bawa has been put into the BC Hall of Fame. He was the first NHL player of South Asian descent, so Indian. And he talked about everything he had to deal with along the way in the 80s when he was coming to the NHL, and how hard it was for him. And there is that conversation to be had, and you have to look for the bright, the silver lining, the bright side of everything that's going on. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is say there is something with the world of hockey that allows some things to be said that probably shouldn't be. And regardless of when they were said and by who, we're starting to see players come out and talk about it. And that conversation's important. Okay, there you go. Thank you guys so much for your support. The Panic Index is still coming today. We do have 13 games, which means a huge review tonight. And then tomorrow we have one game, only the one game, because it's American Thanksgiving, so they're giving most teams the day off, with the exception of two, and that's New Jersey and Montreal play tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for your support, for helping the channel to grow to the point where it is right now, and it still grows even further. And that's thanks to everybody who's commented, liked, shared, and just been a part of this community. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.